The movie opens with Rick Riker, a clumsy teenager who had a crush on his next-door neighbor, Jill Johnson, on his way to a field trip with his best friend, Trey. Jill was already dating someone else and didn't seem to notice Rick. Trey advised Rick to forget about her, explaining that she was part of the popular crowd, and those students never socialized with anyone outside their group. The students soon arrived at the Amalgamated Genetics Lab, where they saw a variety of genetically engineered animals. When Rick saw Jill looking at a beautiful bird, he told her that he would take a photo of it for the school newspaper. Dr. Strom, the head of the research department, warned them that flash photography was not allowed because the animals were sensitive to light, but Rick wasn't listening. As soon as Rick took the picture, the bird burst into flames and fell to the ground. He immediately stomped on it to put out the fire. When the bird stuck to his shoe, he kicked it away, and the carcass hit Jill's boyfriend, Lance Landers. Just as Lance was about to punch Rick, his uncle, Lou Landers, grabbed his shoulder and stopped him. Strom introduced Lou to the students, telling them that he was the visionary and CEO of the company. A little while later, Rick noticed Lou coughing up blood and asked him if he was all right. Lou recognized Rick as the son of Blaine and Julia Riker and asked him how his parents were doing. Rick reminded him that they had died horribly 9 years earlier. As soon as Lou left, Lance shoved Rick into an animal pen. Rick landed in some poop, so he grabbed a bottle marked H2O and sprayed it on his shirt. He soon discovered that the bottle was not filled with water, but a compound called H2O9. Strom explained to the class that the substance was a strong aphrodisiac that could attract any animal. Moments later, the animals in the lab began jumping on Rick. Strom then showed the students a tank containing genetically enhanced dragonflies, noting that there were supposed to be 7 in the tank, but Jill only saw 6. The 7th dragonfly soon emerged and bit Rick on the neck. Just as Strom opened a gate to let more animals into the lab, Rick bumped into a shelf and spilled more H2O9 on himself. Unable to resist the aphrodisiac, various animals piled on top of Rick. Later, the school informed Rick's aunt, Lucille, that her nephew had simply walked off the class trip. Not long, Rick staggers into the house, ailing from the dragonfly bite. He soon passes out on his bed while his uncle, Albert, gives him advice about going through puberty. In the Amalgamated headquarters, Lou reveals to his business partners that he has a terminal illness, and he only has an hour to live. To keep himself alive, he intends to use an invention that can alter DNA and restore his body to perfect health. Strom warns Lou that things could go wrong because the machine hasn't been tested, but Lou insists on using it. Soon after activating the device, it begins modifying Lou's genes, but it explodes due to overheating. One of his business partners, Carlson, assumes that the machine didn't work and tells Lou that he'll be delighted to take over the company when he's gone. When Lou grabs his hand, Carlson's life force seems to transfer to Lou. Carlson turns into an old man in an instant and drops dead. Lou then gets off the machine and tells his partners that they need to make some personnel changes. Strom emits a high-pitched scream as he watches Lou drain the life force of his surviving business associates. After being unconscious for 5 days, Rick wakes up and discovers that the dragonfly bite has healed. While researching the effects of the bite on the internet, someone using the handle prox35016 contacts him and claims to have answers. The unknown individual advises Rick not to seek him out because he'll come to him. At the start of the science fair in Rick's school, the principal announces that Stephen Hawking will work at the university as a visiting professor and perform experiments on a rare element called beryllium. Hawking notes that he's depressed because of his disability, so he invites the students to get high with him, but no one is interested. While Rick attempts to drink from the water fountain, his hands get stuck on the ceramic. When he pulls his hand away, he notices hair growing on his palm. He tries pulling his other hand off the fountain, but it gets detached from the wall and hits Lance in the back of the head while remaining stuck to his hand. Lance tries hitting him in retaliation, but he manages to dodge his punches. However, Rick fails to avoid a third punch because he's not paying attention. While running from Lance, Rick's hands get stuck on the principal's chest when he bumps into her. When he pulls it away, he slams into Hawking, who in turn crashes into a beehive. Later that day, Rick realizes that he's gained new abilities, so he tests them by climbing onto a wall and breakdancing. Suddenly, he sees an old woman about to get hit by a speeding truck, so he pushes her away. The truck slams into Rick, but he emerges without even a scratch. The witnesses call him a hero even though the woman he pushed out of the way gets crushed in a tree removal equipment. When Rick gets home, he tells Albert and Trey that he seems to have gained superpowers. He surmises that he might have armored skin because he was bitten by a dragonfly with a tough exoskeleton. Albert is skeptical, so he tests it by stabbing Rick with a knife. The two are convinced when the knife gets bent while Rick remains unharmed. Trey and Albert encourage him to use his abilities to get fame and money, but Rick stresses that he just wants to be an ordinary kid. Albert then reminds him that it's not what his father wanted for him. Rick goes to his room and looks back at the night he went to the opera with his parents when he was just a child. After the presentation, Blaine noticed that young Rick was bothered by the injustice portrayed in the show, so he told his son that he would change things someday and people would expect him to be a hero. A mugger suddenly asked them for their belongings at gunpoint. While the mugger attempted to take Blaine's family ring, Rick decided to be a hero and fought the thief. While they were struggling to take control of the gun, the weapon fired and hit Blaine and Julia. Another bullet hit a streetlight, which fell on Julia's head. The mugger ran away upon seeing Blaine and Julia lying on the ground. Blaine realized that he was dying, so he told Rick that Albert would take care of him. Noting that Rick would inherit all his assets, Blaine advised him to sell all his shares of Google and noted that it was worthless. He urged the boy to invest heavily in Enron. Then Blaine gave him the family ring and told him that it was his destiny to be a hero. While standing outside the house, Rick hears Jill fighting with her mother. Soon Jill comes out and tells him that she's going through a tough time because her parents want her to go to college, but she wants to be a dancer. When Rick expresses his support for her, Jill remarks that he's more supportive than her boyfriend. She notes that Lance might not be the right man for her because she's beginning to think that she's just dating him to rebel against her father. Lance then arrives in a fancy car to pick up Jill. Before running off, Jill asks Rick to take her for a ride in his car one day. Rick goes on the internet later that night to find an affordable car. Suddenly, a video from Professor Xavier pops up on the screen and advises him to go on a training program to control his powers. The next day, Rick goes to the bank with Albert and Lucille to apply for a car loan. Lucille goes inside with him while Albert waits in the car. Mr. Thompson, the loan officer, immediately turns down Rick's application. Rick pleads with him and notes that he really needs a car, but Thompson stresses that it's not his problem. When a man robs the bank, Rick helps him get away by opening the door for him. Thompson castigates him for letting the man get away, so Rick tells him that it's not his problem. Suddenly, Rick hears 2 gunshots outside. He soon discovers that the robber shot his uncle, but he managed to survive. That night, Lou's vital signs suddenly drop while he's monitoring it, so he absorbs his secretary's life force. While Rick watches over Albert at the hospital, Jill stops by to console him. Rick notes that it's his fault that Albert got shot because he didn't stop the robber. He contends that he's a failure, but Jill reminds him that his uncle believes in him and adds that it's never too late to be the person he wants to be. When he leaves the hospital, Xavier approaches him and takes him on a tour to the school for the non-Asian gifted. Xavier tells him that he started the school to help people control their powers and use them to do good things. The professor tells Rick that he has the potential to be the best superhero, but Rick points out that he can't even fly. Xavier assures him that he will learn to do it once he understands the true nature of heroism. Mrs. Xavier soon interrupts their tour to scold her husband for having an affair with Invisible Girl. After beating up Invisible Girl, Mrs. Xavier continues to berate him for betraying his children, including his newborn. Xavier expresses doubts that the baby is his, so Mrs. Xavier proves it by prompting the baby to display his telekinetic powers and slam Xavier against the wall. Rick is dismayed that Xavier wouldn't be able to teach him the secret to becoming a superhero. Mrs. Xavier then smacks him in the head and tells him that he only needs to make himself a costume. Soon after creating his dragonfly costume, Rick goes on top of a skyscraper. He jumps down in an attempt to fly, but he splatters onto a gargoyle statue. Despite his inability to fly, Rick becomes famous as the Dragonfly after performing extraordinary acts of heroism all over the city. At the Amalgamated office, Strom informs Lou that he must kill each day to survive. He discloses that Lou will need ceruleum, so he wouldn't have to kill every day. After learning from a news article that Hawking is experimenting with ceruleum, Lou plans to steal the rare element from the university's lab. Rick learns that the local newspaper is paying money for pictures of the Dragonfly, so he applies as a photographer. During the interview, he hears that there's a police standoff at the university, so he immediately runs off to check out the situation. Lou, donning a suit of armor and calling himself the Hourglass, has stolen the ceruleum from the lab. When the Dragonfly arrives, he immediately knocks the Hourglass to the wall. The Hourglass, however, manages to hurt the Dragonfly by hurling 3 titanium blades at him. The Hourglass then escapes by blowing a hole in the wall. While Rick tends to his wounds at home, Trey points out that he must be vulnerable to titanium blades. Trey offers to be his partner, but Rick contends that he doesn't need help. Lucille notices Rick staring at Jill through the window, so she warns him that being the girlfriend of the Dragonfly could be dangerous because his enemies will attack the people he loves most. That night, Rick meets Jill outside a theater, where she just auditioned for a part in a play. Rick wants to tell her that he's the Dragonfly, but he remembers Lucille telling him that he needs to keep his identity a secret. As Jill walks home on her own, thugs start chasing her into an alley. Before they can attack, the Dragonfly appears and fights them off. Jill watches him affectionately as he slams a man's head against the wall. He continues showing off by mercilessly breaking the thug's arm. After beating up all the assailants, Jill gives the Dragonfly a passionate kiss as a reward for saving her. Meanwhile, Lou learns he can gain immortality by killing thousands of people. Jill spends Thanksgiving at Lucille's home. As they prepare the turkey, Lance arrives and tells Jill that he invited Lou. Rick soon comes home still wearing his Dragonfly costume. Lou goes to his room to check on him while Lucille is busy, but Rick stays out of sight by clinging to the ceiling. When Lou returns to the dining room, Rick enters the house wearing casual clothes. During dinner, Lou and Rick notice each other's injury, so they both make excuses to hide their secret identities. Before they can even grab a bite, Lou tells Lance that they have to leave. Later on, Rick expresses his love for Jill while Lucille sleeps and passes gas uncontrollably on the couch. They almost kiss while desperately trying to ignore the smell, but they're interrupted when Lou returns to the house as the Hourglass. Rick tries fending him off by throwing a metal ball, but it bounces all over the house and ends up hitting him in the head. The Hourglass proceeds to attack Lucille while Rick is unconscious. Rick later goes to the hospital to check on Lucille, but the doctor tells him she died. The doctor then tells him that Albert has regained consciousness, but he advises Rick not to give him any bad news because it can send him back into a coma. However, the doctor casually mentions that Lucille is dead while entering the room. After burying Lucille, Rick tells Jill that he's not in love with her because he knows that her life will be in danger if they're together. Rick ends up getting depressed and stops doing heroic acts. Trey reminds him that the Hourglass is planning to kill thousands of people, but Rick argues that he can't be a hero because he couldn't stop the Hourglass from killing Lucille, and he can't even fly. Albert points out that he may fail as a hero, but the most important thing is to do it for the best of reasons. After convincing Rick to become a superhero again, the trio realizes that the Hourglass will strike the Empire City Convention Center, where thousands of people will gather for the World Humanity Awards. Albert drives Trey and Rick to the venue, but they still don't know who the Hourglass is. Meanwhile, Lou, Lance, and Jill arrived at a convention center. Later, Rick, unaware that Lou was the Hourglass, asked him for help. Lou told Rick that he had seen the Dalai Lama holding a canister of ceruleum. Rick, now dressed as the Dragonfly, attacked the Dalai Lama just as he was about to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award. Suspecting that the Dalai Lama was hiding ceruleum under his robe, the Dragonfly stripped him naked. A brawl broke out at the convention center as the Dragonfly fought off the security team. Lou, having changed into his Hourglass costume, got hold of the ceruleum and fled into a different convention hall. The Dragonfly followed him and realized that the hall was hosting HeroCon, where attendees were dressed as their favorite heroes and villains. In an attempt to escape, the Hourglass blew up the ceiling, causing it to fall on the Dragonfly. When the Hourglass threw a titanium blade at the Dragonfly, Jill jumped in front of him to block it and was hit in the stomach. Holding Jill in his arms, the Dragonfly went to the rooftop to confront the Hourglass, who was already draining the life force of the people attending the convention. Upon his arrival, the Dragonfly grabbed the Hourglass's arm and funneled some of the energy to Jill. She soon regained consciousness and realized that the Hourglass was only seconds away from achieving immortality. The Hourglass then threw a bomb with a suction cup at the Dragonfly. As the Dragonfly tried to get the bomb off, it ended up sticking to his crotch. He then somersaulted backward to position his crotch in front of the Hourglass. The Dragonfly survived when the bomb detonated, but he soon learned that Jill had fallen from the building. When he jumped down to follow her, Jill noticed his family ring and realized that he was Rick. She told him that she no longer cared if she died as long as she was in his arms. When they kissed, wings emerged from the Dragonfly's back, allowing them to fly back to the rooftop. Later, Rick soared into the sky with Jill, promising that he would be a superhero forever as long as there was crime and injustice. As they enjoyed the view of the city, they were both hit by a helicopter. So, what did you think of the movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you in the next video.